Well, we're now down on Wolf Road, and had to start over. I must have touched the wrong button that caused us to lose the video. That happens. Right there's where Dudley Martin lived. I remember playing in that house a lot. Down here, Gary Halberstadt lived, and with the Halberstadts, Gilbert Halberstadt, who worked for the telephone company for years. And of course, right there it is, folks, the house that Mom built with Boss Beers, and who built a lot of churches. And she come out here, put the money down on a lot, and Mom and Dad had that house built by Boss Spears, and it's been a wonderful, beautiful place. And I can remember going in the upstairs there. Now the garage wasn't on there when we had it. It was just a basement. The Williamses lived there, and the Culbersons lived right on next door there, and the Williamses over the hill a little ways. Ricky Williams, Rita Williams, and Patsy Bell, and all the great folks there. And these were great neighbors, though. All of them were. These little cottages. I can remember going in every one of these houses, and was always treated with respect. I'll try to back out here slowly and take a little picture if I'm able. Right here at 3589 Wolf Road. Alton and Garnette Stephenson, Bingham Stephenson. Put the money down on here, rode out here in the bus, put the money down for the lot, and had that little house built. I lived here until I was about, I guess 7, 8, 9 years old, before we moved out to the farm on Martin Road. There was 2 acres back there. And Dad did a lot of garden work back there, I can tell you that. Dad has always been an excellent gardener and farmer. Of course, he grew up on a farm, and it was the sole support for his mother and his 2 sisters when their father was killed on the railroad, an accident, when Dad was just 5 years old. And right there's that lot where the liquor store would have been put, here on Wolf Road, Nick's Grove. Across the street where the Luzaders lived, where Donna and Phil Resnick live now. And he's, like I said, he's a great teacher, and Donna, she's great at everything. And beautiful lady, wonderful Christian lady. We had many a Bible study class back there at their home, and enjoyed it very much. Now we're headed on down Taylor Mill here, and walked this road a many a time as a kid. I remember one time I came out here, we got lost down at the Rosedale swimming pool down in Latonia, and got separated from my brother Gerald and Mary Ruth and I, no shoes on, and I was about 5 years old, she was about maybe 11, and we walked all the way at the top of the hill here somewhere along here. We stopped at a house because we were exhausted, and we needed to call home and get a ride home or something. Well, we stopped, just happened to stop by accident at some gentleman's house. I wish I remembered his name. And he called Mom, and he took us home, dropped us off there at the house, and he said, "Young fella," said, "why in the world are you so anxious to get home?" I looked up at him and said, "Sir, tonight's Friday night. It's fried chicken night at Mom's house." That was true. Every Friday night was fried chicken, from our own chickens, by the way. And they took a picture of me and Mary standing on the front porch, and that was the first time that I made the front page of the Kentucky Post. And I was about 5 years old, and I've been in there many times since. Some good, some bad, but that's part of life, particularly in politics. But I love them all, and I try to include their picture in the photos that I put up as an honor to them, from the editor on down. Of course, I remember one great editor, Vance Trimble. He was the most man of integrity one of the most men of integrity that I ever met. And boy, he wasn't afraid of anybody. You was right, you're right, wrong, you're wrong. And I loved him, and I loved David Brown, and I loved Mark Nykirk, and I even loved Mr. Farrow. And I'm trying to think. He passed away, and I filmed his funeral as a tribute to him. Mike Farrow, good Christian man, and he was the editor of the newspaper, school newspaper at Northern Community College. And I never will forget, he wrote one editorial saying, "King John." And I was the king when I was up there in the student government. We got a lot of things done in student government. Normally you don't get that much done, but we had a good representatives, and they were all dynamic ladies and gentlemen, mostly ladies. And between them and the fraternity, the one fraternity, we got a lot of things done up there, including getting established for the first time Northern Kentucky State College, authorizing it through the legislature when Louis Nunn was governor. Phil King was one of the greatest supporters, and Ken Harper and Art Schmidt over in Campbell County. And Clyde Middleton later too was helpful. He particularly was active in bringing the law school over to Northern Kentucky, Chase Law School. But it was the students that gathered some 3,000 signatures and raised the cane about getting a voice for all the people of Northern Kentucky. And there's Great La Rose's operation there. The great folks of this former Simon Kenton graduate, Holland Drive. And appropriately named. And I tell you something, the growth in this area is going to continue. Great people. But coming back to the Northern Kentucky Community College, I drove up there the other day, probably illegally, because I was doing construction up through there, but I didn't realize it until I got back down. I was supposed to report that I had gone up there. But anyway, I went up there to the top, and I couldn't believe my eyes. They're building condominiums all across the old road down to the Big Bend. And not only are they doing that, but they're tore down the whole Northern Community College. Just tore it down, the old law school and everything, library and everything, and building condominiums up there. And I was really shocked to see it, if you want to know the truth, and somewhat disappointed, but not unexpectedly. That's most everything now is done over at Campbell County at the base of Northern Kentucky University, where it should be. And it's doing a great job, and I'm quite proud of it. We need to get a little more conservative teaching over there on some things, and return of godly principles, and not forget that all of that comes from the will of God. You don't get those things just by them being given to you. Education is something to be worked for and to be cherished, and knowledge. And we need to make sure in our universities and our schools we're teaching about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and how the country was founded, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but mostly the good, or we wouldn't have these schools today. But that's a little story about the Kentucky College, Northern Kentucky University. Frank Steele was the first president and good friend of mine, and we worked together on many projects, including the credit union with Gil Hammond, who was the UNISERV director for all the teachers in Northern Kentucky. And he was the one that met with Dr. Steele about bringing the credit union over for all the teachers, as well as all of the educators in Northern Kentucky, a part of the Northern Kentucky Federal Credit Union. And I was the first chairman of that board, or at least on the board. And Hattie was on there, Gil, of course, and several other education leaders. Started the first credit union, and the first organization called Kentuckians for Better Schools, which I was on, from Northern Kentucky, with Bert Combs and David Shear and Preston Fields down in Louisville, and some great folks that set out to change education in Kentucky and improve all of our schools and bring teachers involved into the system of education. Now we're going to head up to across the 3L highway here, and as you've seen the growth there, all up and down the highway, my goodness gracious. We're going to head over to Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, and see the 2 homes that June and I built over there. By the way, Miss June Diamond Stephenson, I couldn't have done any of these things without her, frankly, as my wife and helpmate, and as a wonderful Christian lady who has been teaching Bible study classes to ladies for 20-some years, and all across Northern Kentucky, Lexington, and Louisville. And just thrilled when the good Lord brought her into my life, sitting at what's now known as the Public House. It was back then known as Charlie McKeever's. And I was sitting in there in Charlie McKeever's one night eating supper. Pat Walker, well, it used to be Willensack, but she walked in there. I'd known her as a high school senior. When she and the other girls come down to my office, I was a field representative for Congressman John Breckinridge and all across Northern Kentucky. And they come down and they said, "Mr. Stephenson, we know that you graduated from Simon Kenton High School." I said, "That's right." And she said, "Well, we would like to have a girls softball team, but we need somebody to sponsor it for us." And I said, "Well, let me think on that." I thought for about 2 minutes, and I said, "Okay, as long as I get to name it." She said, "That's fine." I said, "We're going to get you uniforms. We're going to call it Stephenson's Farmerettes." Because I knew that I was thinking about running for Commissioner of Agriculture in Kentucky. And so I named the softball team teachers, named it Farmerettes, and Stephenson's Farmerettes. Well, they did a great job. We're a winning team, and I really appreciated it. And she came up to me just years later now, and she said, "Mr. Stephenson, I hope you don't mind, but I've invited some young lady to your picnic tomorrow. We're having a big picnic at the house, one of the houses you're going to see over here in a few minutes, 127 Seville Court in Fort Mitchell." And I was having about 70, 80 people come to a picnic, and I'll be daggone it. She said, "Come on up here, I'd like for you to meet her." So I left my food sitting there and went on up there, and about halfway up through the restaurant, which was called Charlie McKeever's at the time, and I said, "Oh my goodness gracious," to myself, laid my eyes on her, and I said, "Invite her to my picnic any day." Wow, what a knockout. That's my brain. And so anyway, went on over and she introduced me, and I got to chit-chatting, and I thought, now make my best moves here, watch my presentation. Well, after I made my presentation moves, and I said, "You think maybe it'd be okay to give me your phone number?" She said, "I think not." And so I reached down and picked up a Charlie McKeever's coaster after being rebuffed and wrote my name and phone number on it, and a diagram on how to get to the house over on Seville Court, 127 Seville Court, right off of Beechwood Road. So anyway, I said, "Come on to the picnic tomorrow, no strings attached. You'll have a good time." and I knew she would have a good time. So anyway, I went back and sat down, finished my meal, and about 25, 30 minutes later, I got up and left and walked out the door, and as I was walking out the door, she looked over at me and I looked at her. Our eyes locked on each other, and she said right then, now she said this is afterwards, but of course she said, the Lord told her, there goes your husband out the door. And believe me, I really cherished that, because I've always said, wasn't anything I had to do to win Miss June's hand. It was the Lord that gave me the opportunity. I just had to be patient. And patient I was, because it was 4 years later that she actually married me in this house, 127 Seville Court, with an April Fool's Day party. And we had it on March the 31st. We got married with her mom there and my dad and Gil and Jan Hammond to administer the service. And June's best friend is the best lady. And we got married there. Debbie Darnflow at the time. It's Debbie Purdom now. And we got married there. And 4 days after we got married, we had a big party first, April the 1st, right after we got married on the 31st, and announced that we were married. And 4 days later, we took off to Europe and went through 8 countries in Europe and filmed it all. And you'll love it. It was through 2 communist bloc countries before the Iron Curtain even came down. That was Yugoslavia and Hungary, all the way down through Thessalonica, down into Greece, Athens, over to Patras, over to the Greek island of Corfu and the other islands, then off to Brindisi, Italy, and Bari, Italy, and over to Naples, and up to Rome, and up to Florence, and up to Venice. Then Germany, and Austria, and Switzerland, and part of France. And it was a wonderful trip. Filmed all of it and put it all now on Facebook and YouTube. And it's about 15 one-hour shows. So if you're bored some night, get your computer out and look up Travels with John Stephenson. You can watch our trip through Europe, where we never had a single room reserved, and we filmed almost 20 some hours of footage through Europe. So that's the story on how I met Miss June. The smartest move I ever made, and I really didn't even make it. The Lord did. And but she's been with me now for 35 years. And where we're going to be buried is right in that cemetery there at Highland Cemetery, where we walked our first time. Went on a walk. I didn't tell you this, but when she got to the house, she walked around the corner of the house at the picnic. I saw her coming out of the corner of my eye, and I dashed toward her and walked right into the volleyball net and tripped over a stool. That's the truth. And got up and said, "What do you like to do?" She said, "I like to walk." So right there's the famous post office there, United States Post Office in Fort Mitchell. I've used it many a time. And so anyway, I said to everybody, I said, we'll be back in a little while. We're going to take a walk over, let me let this gentleman behind me get by. We're going to take a walk over around town, show her the town. She likes to walk. So we walked for 3 hours, come back, and everybody's gone except one lady. But I'll show you where we stopped when we get over to 127 Seville Court. I'll show you where we stopped and how I greeted her. Now we're in Fort Mitchell here. This is one of the places we've always loved, and loved the people here. The mayors and the city council members and the school, Beechwood High School. That's where my sister first started her teaching career, and where I actually did some substitute teaching for a good little while. Of course, the Greyhound Grill there is a historic place. It's on my history tapes, a history of all 120 counties in Kentucky. And those are all on YouTube too, where you can see now. We just recently posted all of those up onto YouTube and onto Facebook, so you can see the history of all 120 counties in Kentucky. And I might add to you, my little nephew, well, he's not little anymore. Well, he's a lot smaller than me. But anyway, Eric Guyman is an architect, and his company and he worked very hard in the restoration of Henry County's courthouse. They had about I think, $11 or $12 million grant to build to remodel the courthouse there historically, and I hope I can find a picture of that to show you, because they won several awards for what they did, and I'm very proud of Eric Diamond, Keith and Jenny's son, for going into the work he did. He graduated from Western University, and some of y'all might remember when I filmed his graduation down there at Western. And he's now living in Louisville and working for a company that did that work and on Henry County's courthouse. And I'm very proud of that, because we visited all 120 counties and filmed the history of every county in Kentucky. And it's nice to see things like that. And there's where the city building is in Fort Mitchell. And there's the church that June and I went to for many years, Fort Mitchell Baptist Church. And when we first came back over from North College Hill Presbyterian, we come back, and when we come back here to Fort Mitchell, we went to church there with Gil Hammond and Jan Hammond. Gil was a deacon there at the church, and French Harmon was a pastor, and 2 or 3 other pastors that were great men. They got a great church there, and that's where the men's Fort Mitchell prayer breakfast was started, that I belonged to for many, many years. In fact, I was there at the very first meeting of it. And Beechwood Road, right here, of course, Highland Cemetery up over back there. We'll show you that in a few minutes. But first, let's go down Beechwood Road here. And a beautiful place here that with beautiful homes and a beautiful history. And history of this wonderful small school that always does and excels in academics and in sports. Even though it's a small school, they work very hard. Home of the Tigers. And now some of these houses you'll see are new, that have been built recently, but some of them are very old too. But this is a beautiful school with great people. And I can remember Gene Sells when he was here as a principal. And just a lot of wonderful people. Like one of my former students, Steve Hutton, was principal here. He was my student when I was a government teacher at Erlanger Lloyd High School, and I was president of the Education Association. Down here is where John Blakely lived. Now, not necessarily right there. John Blakely lived right here in this house here. And he was a Kenton County historian that gave me the history of Kenton County and on my historic tapes. And then also Bill Straw gave me the history, who was an extension agent out in Independence. Now there's Deville Court, some condominiums back there, and here is Seville Court, where I built our home, Miss June and I lived in, where we got married. And there, right there, you see the 2 stone pillars. That goes up to the last house we built there at 213 Beechwood Road, and we'll come back around and show that to you. Now here's what I was going to tell you here on Seville Court. Of course, it's not here anymore, I don't think, because they built new houses up here. But right there on where that driveway goes up there, before those houses were there, Virginia Cotoris had her home here. And she had won several flower awards from the Greater Northern Kentucky Cincinnati Flower Association. And there was a little tree house there, sort of a little wishing well house. And June, I said, look up there at that wishing well house. She turned around and looked up there, how pretty it was. I reached over and grabbed her hand, pulled her to me, and planted a big kiss on her. And I said, good Lord, right now, I knew this is the lady for me. Woo, mercy. And we walked on up here to the house, and Dr. Smith lives there. I think he had that home built later. And that part of his land was in my backyard over there on the other home I built. And the Wells lived up here, and I think they still live here, maybe right there, but I'm not sure. But John Wells and his wife, wonderful people, and Schachters, Nancy and Paul Schachter, wonderful people, lived in this house here. They had that built. Now these houses, some of these were built by, I believe it was, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I can't remember. But they're beautiful homes back here on this dead-end street. And right here, folks, you see the house that June and I bought, this skeleton of a house. I bought it, and we finished it up. I finished it up. Now, I had it finished before we met, but she helped me add the touches to it. And this house was a beautiful home. Garage on the end, and as you can see, it's still a beautiful place. 127 Seville Court, and right there's where we stood in some of the pictures you'll see. And a doctor lived up there, Dr. Hugan, I believe it was, lived up there behind us, and another big house back behind us here. But you'll see the landscaping and how they've done it. And that's where we had the picnic, in the backyard there. As I said, she walked around the corner of the house. Now I got to figure out how to turn around here, so hang on a second. That's where the Hugan, Dr. Chuck Hugan lived. And there's a little house right there you can see from the back of it here that June and I built and lived in. And there's the backyard, and where the volleyball net was. Beautiful place.